Good morning. Please be seated. Continue to fan yourselves as necessary. Members of the class of 2018, parents, family members, friends, faculty, and staff, I welcome you to this baccalaureate service and to the entire series of events that will culminate tomorrow morning with our commencement ceremony. After tomorrow, you, our seniors, will be graduates of Washington and Lee University, a distinction you will carry with you for the rest of your lives. Those lives, I am sure, will be ones of consequence, full of accomplishments that will bring further distinction to you and to your alma mater. These are a happy few days, though also strange. They're full of powerful and mixed emotions. They intersperse moments of high formality, such as our gathering this morning, with precious moments of informality with family and friends. There's inevitably sadness in your leave takings, and you would not be human if you did not feel at least some anxiety as you face a future that's full of promise yet necessarily uncertain. But let this period also be overflowing with joy and gratification that comes with knowing you have done well. You've grown as individuals and become forever a member of a very special and extended community. There's an established rhythm to this series of events at Washington and Lee. Tomorrow is a time of celebration. Today is one of reflection and of giving thanks. Each of you knows that you would not be here today without the support of family and friends, without the guidance and encouragement of your faculty, without the support of the staff, without the generations of alumni who have come before you and given so generously that you might benefit from the same experience that profoundly shaped their lives. And so we gather for this baccalaureate service. It arises from the religious traditions of the university, which was founded by disciplined, thrifty, strong-willed Scots-Irish Presbyterians. They came to this valley in search of freedom of religion and with a desire to fashion a community of hardworking individuals. From that disposition, they created a place of learning that has always been non-sectarian and non-denominational. The origins of this day go back to the 18th century, and as it was then, it remains a time for us to reflect on how an education shapes the life of a caring young individual. For your time here has taught you to share the fruits of your education, to take your life in a direction of service, no matter your career, and to be mindful of ideals that transcend the individual self. To help us with that theme, I now call upon the members of the University Singers who will sing The Road Home.
Call
Thank you, University Singers, for that beautiful song. We're privileged this morning to hear from the recipients of the Algernon Sydney Sullivan Medallion who were selected by the faculty. This is one of the highest awards at the university. Washington and Lee presents the Algernon Sydney Sullivan Award to the undergraduate senior man and woman who exhibit Sullivan's qualities by excelling, quote, in high ideals of living, in fine spiritual qualities, and in generous and disinterested service to others. When the institution makes the student award, it appoints the recipient as its representative to bear its standard before the world. Earlier today, I had the pleasure of presenting this year's Algernon Sydney Sullivan medallions to Hannah Falchuk and Angel Vela de la Garza Evia. Hannah Falchuk from Hockessin, Delaware, is a writer, a teacher, and the creator of an event where students show their appreciation for the hardworking staff of dining services. She majored in politics and she minored in both poverty and human capability studies and in mass communications. Hannah has won recognition for her achievements in sustainability with the Not Unmindful of a Sustainable Future Award, in politics, where she earned a Schlegel Scholarship for International Studies, and in leadership, with her initiation into Omicron Delta Kappa, the National Leadership Honor Society. She's applied her talent for writing and language as a tutor for local high school and elementary school students and for her peers at W&L's Writing Center. She's contributed to the Ring Tum Phi newspaper, In General magazine, and the Washington and Lee Political Review. Hannah's pursued her interest in politics with a stint as a legislative intern at the National Community Action Foundation in conjunction with the Washington Turn program. She's also been inducted into Pi Sigma Alpha, the National Political Science Honor Society. Her passion for community service led her to serve as an outreach intern for the homeless in New York through the Shepherd Higher Education Consortium, and as a volunteer with W&L's Campus Kitchen at an assisted living facility in Natural Bridge. Hannah leaves us for the Slovak Republic, where she will work as an English teaching assistant on a Fulbright grant. Angel Vela de la Garza Evia came to us from Monterrey, Mexico. He majored in chemistry engineering and minored in mathematics. Among his many honors for both his academics and his volunteer service, he received the Robert E. Atkins Engineering Prize, the Edward Lee Pinney Prize, and the Neighbors Service League McLaughlin Award for volunteerism. He was deeply appreciated by his peers for his exemplary work as a residential advisor throughout his time at W&L. Angel's community service as a Bonner Scholar encompassed more than 2,100 hours. He served as the president of English for Speakers of Other Languages and on the leadership team of W&L's Campus Kitchen. He also just completed his term as the president of W&L's Alpha Circle of the ODK Honor Society. After he receives his diploma, Angel is headed back to Monterrey, where last year he founded a program called STEMito with the Davis Projects for Peace grant. He'll continue to lead and develop the program, which introduces kids to science, technology, engineering, and math. Angel will also be working in the petrochemical industry and applying to grad school to study data science. I now call upon Hannah and Angel to present readings that each of them has chosen to help us celebrate this occasion. Hannah.
Playwright Susan Laurie Parks said during a visit to campus earlier this year that we should entertain our wildest thoughts. She asked that we truly entertain them, that we invite them to dinner and make them feel like honored guests. By stretching our imaginations to fit them, we might accomplish what had before seemed to us impossible. But as we entertain our wildest hopes, we might also be visited by some uninvited guests, fear and doubt. And tomorrow, our dazzling college graduation might also bring us doubts as to whether we will be able to reach the marks for success that we set for ourselves, or whether the paths that we choose might be different from what we expected them to be. Yet as much as this moment of ending and beginning is one of uncertainty, it is also one of opportunity. We are on the edge of something new and exciting, and I hope that we will acknowledge our doubts, not as something to avoid, but as something to celebrate, something that will push us further than we had imagined. The poem I will read was written by an innovative and compassionate writer and teacher, and she happens to be in the audience with us today. Please enjoy my recitation of Professor Deborah Miranda's poem, Blessing the Doubts. Bless you, doubt shiny as copper, creeping into my pocket full of debts and past due loans. And bless you, enthusiastic doubt, you spring monsoon, washing away all reason and linear thought. Sharp doubt, teach me how to praise fear in new languages. Tuck yourself into my shoe, constant and true as a splinter. O faithful doubt that refuses to desert me, loyal as a family ghost or demented mascot, haunt on. Ragged runaway doubts, let me harbor you on dark November evenings when every other door stands locked. I remember you, the one who pants like a seasoned hound. You keep up, keep your head down, scent your prey. Bless you especially, dark-eyed doubt, whose gaze leads me to the ledge, pushes me off into impossible. Thank you.
Today, I will be reading an excerpt from one of Deepak Chopra's works and conclude with a quote from Paulo Coelho's The Alchemist, which is a story about a shepherd boy who leaves everything behind in pursuit of an unknown treasure. As Chopra said, we're travelers on a cosmic journey, stardust, swirling and dancing in the eddies and whirlpools of infinity. Life is eternal. We have stopped for a moment to encounter each other, to meet, to love, to share. This is a precious moment, but it is transient. It is a little parenthesis in eternity. If we share with caring, lightheartedness, and love, we'll create abundance and joy for each other. And then, this moment will have been worthwhile. 4 years ago, we stopped and began a new stage in our lives. At Washington Lee, we met individuals who inspired us to fulfill our dreams and aspirations, and who continuously believed in our ability to be here today. We built upon our love of learning by seeking intellectual growth in areas that we didn't even know that we were passionate about. We shared our stories and experiences of who we are and where we come from, and by doing so, left a transcendental mark at this institution. So as we take this precious moment with us to our next endeavor, remember what the alchemist said to the boy as they commenced the journey through the desert sands. Don't think about what you've left behind. If what one finds is made of pure matter, it will never spoil. And one can always come back. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah and Angel. I now have the honor of introducing our baccalaureate speaker. Harlan R. Beckley has spent well more than half his life as a member of the Washington and Lee community. He's a stranger neither to the university nor to this podium. As acting president during the 2005-2006 academic year, he delivered the commencement address from this very spot. And he was the featured speaker at this baccalaureate gathering 4 years ago. He probably imagined we would not call upon him again. He was wrong. I'm delighted that Harlan has accepted our invitation for this return engagement. I'm going to pause for a moment. Technical difficulty. Apologies for the delay. Apparently somebody's taking the opportunity to break into the Reeves Center, and security is on its way. We're going to continue. So, as I was saying, I'm delighted that Harlan Beckley has accepted our invitation to speak at Baccalaureate. The Fletcher Otey Thomas Professor of Religion Emeritus at W&L, Harlan Beckley came to Lexington in 1974 from Nashville, where he had just completed his PhD in Christian ethics at Vanderbilt. At Washington and Lee, Professor Beckley taught courses in the Bible, comparative religion, and contemporary theology and ethics. He also taught in the Applied Ethics program on society and the professions. In 1997, Harlan introduced a new course to our curriculum. It was modestly titled Poverty, an Introduction. What an introduction indeed. 2 decades later, we can look back and recognize that course as the spark that gave rise to the Shepherd program for the interdisciplinary study of poverty and human capability. Professor Beckley conceived the Shepherd program as a curricular and co-curricular initiative that would combine interdisciplinary coursework in poverty studies with community-based service learning opportunities such as the Campus Kitchen, the Bonner program, and the Neighbors Service League. Today, the Shepherd program is the most popular minor at Washington and Lee. Moreover, through Harlan's pioneering work, W&L has become a model for other institutions. He helped to establish and served as the director of the Shepherd Higher Education Consortium on Poverty, which includes more than 24 undergraduate and professional schools. Professor Beckley's scholarship is focused on social justice. His 1992 book, Passion for Justice, examines the lives and thought of 3 prominent American theologians. Professor Beckley is also a past president of the Society of Christian Ethics, and in 2002, he received the Outstanding Faculty Award from the State Council of Higher Education for Virginia, which is the Commonwealth's highest award for excellence in higher education. Tomorrow, when we reconvene for graduation, we will recognize Professor Beckley's lifetime of accomplishments with an honorary degree from Washington and Lee. Before turning the podium over to Harlan, I would like to introduce his wife, the former First Lady of W&L, Debbie Beckley, who is known to many of you. And I would also like to welcome Harlan and Debbie's son and daughter-in-law, Benjamin and Jess Beckley Chase. In addition, seated with Debbie today is Nancy Shepherd, who with her late husband Tom Shepherd, a 1952 alumnus of W&L and a former trustee, were instrumental in the establishment of the program that bears their name. Would you please join me in welcoming them?
President Dudley, members of the Washington and Lee Administration and Board of Trustees, fellow faculty and staff, students, especially seniors and their family and guests, I am honored to offer this baccalaureate address, and I'm honored to share this podium with Hannah and Angel. When President Dudley called to invite me to speak at Baccalaureate, I had a quick response. You know that I spoke at Baccalaureate just 4 years ago. His retort was equally rapid. We thought you could probably think of something new to say by now. I know when I've been outfoxed, so I quipped, I'll do my best. I spoke 4 years ago about the experience of grace for which we owe gratitude to others and how it informs a sense of obligation. Today, I will talk about the importance of judging behavior, policies, ideas, values, institutions, and even persons, including ourselves. Judgment may seem antithetical to grace, but before I finish, I hope to persuade you that judgment, properly executed, mediates grace, even divine grace. Why encourage judgment, especially judgment that may be critical of behavior institutions, and values that we hold dearly? My answer is threefold. First, events of the past year have vividly called us to make judgments. It has been a year of persons, especially women speaking publicly and forcefully about the injustice of sexual harassment and assault. Events, especially in Charlottesville, have raised questions about how we remember our past and how remembering has consequences for relations in the present. In this case, the call to judgment has been especially acute for those of us bound by respect for this community. And I recommend that you take a look at the report of the Commission on Institutional History posted on the Washington Lee website. Events have nearly forced us to make judgments about our nation's immigration, environmental, drug, gun, and foreign policies. We have been challenged by law enforcement and incarceration practices, and how trade, taxes, labor practices, health care and public health, and government investments affect economic justice for those who are poor. Science has been questioned from different points of view. What is good science? And what does it contribute to regulatory policy regarding the environment, climate change, food safety, health policy, and gun safety? We have been compelled to consider the relationship between sexual behavior, respect for persons, families, and family structure, poverty, and opportunities for children. Even our art galleries and museums have been forced to judge the relationship between aesthetics and these values and behaviors. If we have any commitment whatsoever to the common good and justice, we need to make judgments about behavior, institutions, and values. Second, we have unfortunately been tempted to retreat from public judgments and discussions about these matters in order to avoid controversy. I remember my grandfather telling me not to talk about religion or politics because it might offend others. Clearly, as a professor of religious ethics and poverty studies, I did not heed his advice very well. But I don't recall a time since my grandfather's admonition when so many have warned us to avoid public judgments in order to preserve relationships. We have been advised to steer away from controversial topics around holiday dinner tables and at social occasions. Our daughter is a nurse practitioner with Planned Parenthood. She holds reasonably nuanced and evolving judgments about women's health, sexual practices, and abortion. But she is frequently cautioned against discussing her work or views with others. I am an ordained United Methodist minister. Many of my fellow clergy advance the view that Jesus of Nazareth expressed love in his unwillingness to judge others, a view that ignores Jesus' harsh judgment against those who did not feed the hungry, care for the sick, welcome the stranger, or tend to the imprisoned. Sometimes it seems that the only religious or moral judgment permitted is to condemn those who judge others' behavior or persons. Although our circumstances compel us to make personal judgments about multiple matters, we are simultaneously encouraged to keep our judgments private, to live and let live. In addition to being logically impossible, attempts to sustain this tension in our lives is unhealthy for us and for our society. Third, if the tension between necessarily making judgments and being encouraged to keep our judgments private seems ironic, the greater irony is that those who make public judgments often seek to destroy those with whom they disagree. Devastating our opponents is raised above achieving agreement or redeeming them and ourselves. We recently experienced a campaign for President of the United States in which one candidate and many of his cohorts fell into the rhetoric of locking up his opponent, and the other candidate called many supporters of her opponent irredeemable deplorables. This destructive rhetoric persists. Some opponents on both sides of the abortion debate wrongly perceive that only an absolutist position is acceptable. The debate about criminal and police justice easily falls into a binary power contest between supposed SOBs who hate America and men and women in uniform and police conspirators intending only harm to persons of other races and economic classes. Learning to make beneficial public judgments is not only a matter of speaking forcefully, it requires judgments intended to redeem others and sometimes ourselves. Judgments sometimes need to be harsh, but the goal should never be to destroy others. Sacred writings in the theistic traditions are replete with accounts of the redemptive purpose of judgment. But this realization has rarely been accentuated to me so boldly as when I co-officiated at my daughter's wedding last summer. I was assigned a text from the prophet Hosea about God's relationship to Israel. Sacred writings rarely display harsh judgments more vividly. I was jarred and disconsolate by the betrayal of Israel as an unfaithful bride whose punishment was to be made bare as the wilderness, parched as the desert, and left to die of thirst. Harsh judgment indeed. However, the denouement of this judgment was for God to go with Israel into the wilderness and make her his husband, his partner, and his people. The metaphor of Israel as a bride to a vengeful but merciful and redemptive God is misguided. But there can be no mistake here and elsewhere that Scripture has a redemptive theme. Harsh as it may be, it is redemptive. Note also that redemption is not sheer forgiveness, but a restoration, perhaps even a remaking into something new. Probably in the Me Too movement, the harsh judgment typically targets violent males more than unfaithful brides. Nevertheless, the hope should be to enter into a new and lasting covenant in which new behavior, values, and policies are both just and uniting. If judgment can redeem the undeserving and heal injustice, let's look more closely at the character of redeeming judgment. First, it has to be judgment and not merely mercy. It has to call us and others to account. Judgment redeems when it changes and not merely accepts what is. And that change requires more than tolerating unjust behavior, values, and character. Second, sacred writings record divine judgment retrospectively and judgments manifested in events, not merely in human words. We are not God. Our words can be wrong. We all need to be redeemed as well as to exercise judgment. We become instruments of redemptive judgment only by recognizing that we are unable to make sound judgments by gifts received from others. We must internalize that we need to learn and be redeemed by the judgment of others. Only disingenuous and ostentatious pontificating, proclaiming belief in forgiveness and redemption for which they had no need for themselves, is to be avoided. I urge us to make judgments recognizing that we are enabled by parents, teachers, colleagues, and acknowledging that we learn from the judgments of others. We often benefit from turning judgments on ourselves. Let me offer an example for using myself. In the early 90s, before most of you graduates were born, I taught social and economic justice in the religion department. I still recall vividly an African American senior asking me why I offered no course on religion and justice focused on race in America, particularly Martin Luther King Jr. I stuttered and realized the student was focusing my own judgments on me. I subsequently offered a course on the theology and ethics of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, a course that I taught until we started the Shepherd program. Other faculty preceded me in this focus on race, and many now teach courses on race relations and justice, including my former student, Professor Ted Delaney. But that student's comment to me and about the course and the course that followed were eye-opening for me personally. Teaching the course informed my own scholarship and teaching in the Shepherd program. The student's judgment was important for me and for W&L. Thankfully, others were making similar judgments in our community. When Washington Lee began focused poverty studies in 1997, about the time you were born, we proposed a series of courses that would eventually constitute a minor. A colleague and friend of mine from the law school reminded me and others that studying poverty from a strictly research approach was like studying scum on a pond. It never penetrates the surface understanding. His point was harsh, correct, and persuasive. When the Shepherd program started, it included a summer internship conducted in collaboration with students from Berea and Spelman College in Alabama. A collaborative internship in which approximately 30 of you have participated remains a centerpiece of the Shepherd Consortium of 26 schools. It may be hyperbolic to call my colleagues' judgment redemptive, but it surely changed and benefited me and higher education at Washington Lee and beyond. Note in these examples, judgment mediates grace, a gift for which I could claim little responsibility. And those who judge were enabled by their experience and education rather than claiming credit for themselves. This redeeming judgment can come in forms other than religious, philosophical, ethical, or straightforwardly political arguments. It can come from the sciences and through literature and the arts. It will be my honor tomorrow to receive a degree with Magri Agassiz a distinguished teacher and writer from Wellesley College. In a recently historically and autobiographically based novel, Professor Hockessin offers effective, harsh judgments about human rights in Chile and the U.S., in the words of an ostensibly adolescent narrator. The book, I Lived on Butterfly Hill, is accessible to adolescents and offers searing judgments through an elegantly told story. I recommend it to you. Regardless of your age, for what you can learn about human rights, politics, and U.S. foreign policy. Let me offer another example by focusing on one of you. Sarah Jones worked as a Shepherd program intern last summer at the City of Refuge in Atlanta. In an essay about what she learned, Sarah wrote about her naivete regarding the term privilege, which she had been tossing around loosely on the basis of her academic experience. Sarah reflects, "The time has come to be honest. Privilege is a buzzword. I cannot count the instances in which I have thrown the term out, whether in a medical school application, in classroom discussions, or in casual conversations. I somehow come to believe that using the word privilege makes me worldly, wise beyond my years. I don't believe that I am unique in this. I think a lot of us have fallen into this trap of seeing privilege as an abstract intellectual concept. In my own life, I spent a lot of time and energy thinking about the only form of privilege I do not have, male privilege. This belief that I am somehow disadvantaged makes me insist on being referred to as a woman, not a girl. This past summer, though, I got to see what privilege really is, a tangible force that systematically denies otherwise deserving people the right to reach their full potential. Inequality matters at every level of privilege, but at the City of Refuge, privilege can mean the difference between life and death. Sarah illustrates using the realities she encountered. My supervisors told me that I was never to go to the convenience store in the neighborhood. I would not be safe there. I learned later that these stores will pay a resident of the neighborhood $250 for a $500 SNAP card, and then stock their shelves with food purchased with the card. This practice particularly targets those suffering from substance abuse who are desperate for cash. The City of Refuge, Sarah tells us, provides a multitude of services to the community: health care, after-school programs, vocational training, housing programs, and a program specifically for women escaping lives of exploitation. Sarah shares a particularly wrenching passage from her journal. My heart has felt like a rock for approximately 9 hours, and the usual remedies have not worked. Today could be filed under several headings. Aggressively horrible. The only time I wanted to cry at work. The only time I cried about work. Testing the limits of compartmentalization, or simply sadness. This morning, I sat in on an abuse survivor support group. Women recounted the kidnappings of children of their fathers, sexual assaults in front of children, childhood abuse at the hands of their family members, and the financial traps that so often led them to stay in abusive relationships in hopes of providing for their children and in fear of what might happen to them on the streets. My heart and my body weep. I am thinking about the notion of blurred lines that permeates so much of college life. What happens to consent when people are drinking, when mixed signals are sent, when memories are fickle? I am privileged enough to forget that sometimes lines could not be clearer and less blurry. I am privileged enough to be floored by these stories, while many of the women in the room simply nodded along. Wow. Sarah helps us to become sensitive to our privilege relative to the women with whom she worked and to marvel at her self-awareness in these circumstances. We can learn from her. To place Sarah's observation in context, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution reported that in January, 8 homeless persons in Atlanta died of hypothermia. Sarah is surely right. Lack of privilege is literally a matter of life and death at the City of Refuge. Lest there be doubt, Sarah attributes her insights in this essay to her entire education at Washington Lee, not merely to her internship experience. She concludes, I am reassured by the most heartbreaking 8 weeks of my life because I know what lies ahead. Structural inequality and social injustice aren't going to go away overnight, nor is one person going to solve these problems. But there are so many good people in the world, such as the team at the City of Refuge, devoting their lives to making the community around them just a little bit better. And that's what Washington Lee and the Shepherd program have given me the tools to do. Make the community around me a little better. I'm headed to medical school next year to pursue a dual degree, MD, Masters of Public Health. I want to be an OB/GYN in an undeserved area. And any time at Washington Lee, and my time at Washington Lee has given me the knowledge that I would not have received otherwise. I have an understanding of how privilege intersects inequality and social injustice, and I have the conviction that I can do something to help. I conclude now with a few observations about Sarah's judgment in this poignant story. First, Sarah is not content to accumulate academic credentials for medical school from her internship and consent to policies and behaviors she knows to be wrong or unjust. She steps up to make judgments. Second, Sarah recognizes the gift and privilege of her college education and how they enable her to make judgments that she could not otherwise offer. She is graced to make these judgments. Third, she can turn these judgments on her own hubris, naivete, and privilege and injustice. Her judgments are not simply castigations of others. Fourth, Sarah's judgments are sharp-edged and go against the grain of standard bromides and acceptable behavior. They demand respect for persons who have failed, such as addicts or women who have partnered with predators. Finally, Shara's judgments point toward a positive professional career for herself and for all of us, toward prudently redeeming unjust policies and and persons rather than simply condemning them. I want to leave you with this wisdom from your classmate. And many of you, I believe, have acquired similar wisdom. Do not fall prey to the temptation to live and let live. Speak publicly in an informed and reasonable manner to judge behavior, values, institutions, policies, and practices that do not advance justice and the common good. Even if you're not always right, you can raise the level of public discourse. Recognize that you are enabled to judge by gifts that are not of your own making, and that your judgments can correct your thinking and your behavior as well as that of others. Finally, intend that your judgments, no matter how harsh they need to be, aim to redeem, not to destroy, or to advance selfish goals. Public judgment is not a zero-sum game. The end goal, like the end goal of the God of Israel, is for the other to become a partner bound in covenant. If we learn to make public judgments in this manner, our judgments will not be antithetical to grace. They will be means of grace. Thank you.
Thank you, Harlan. You did indeed come up with something new to say. We knew you could do it, and you've given us the gift of much to think about. We will now once again hear from the university singers. Thank you again to the university singers and their director, Dr. Shane Lynch, for their contributions to our ceremony this morning. Their work is not yet done. In just a moment, they will lead us in the W&L hymn. Before they do, let me wish you all an enjoyable 24 hours, your last as students at Washington and Lee. Let them be among the most meaningful of your time together. And now please rise as we hear the W&L hymn.
In the shadows of white columns, we stop to hear the chimes, worn steps on which we lean.
Please join us for lunch on Cannon Green, and if you wish, at Lee House afterwards. We'll see you again tomorrow at 10 a.m. for commencement exercises. We are now adjourned. Thank you.